you everybody for joining us today. Really appreciate you being here. We have some really good news and good updates, and we have a presenter. We have Neal Baalam, a wildlife refuge specialist. I got his title correct, I think, this time, who's going to be doing a presentation on described fire. So I don't know how many people have met Neal, but Neal, do you want to say hello and just introduce yourself since you're our guest speaker tonight?
Absolutely. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know me, I'm Neal Baalam. I'm, like Nancy said, the wildlife refuge specialist. Been there, it's crazy. I've been there a little over 2 years now. So really at the refuge, I do a little bit of everything from helping with the biology program and Karen and everything she's got going on, especially during the field season. Then a lot of admin stuff, pushing papers across the desk, trail maintenance. I mean, the full gamut of whatever the refuge throws at me. Kind of do a little bit of everything. So,
well, thanks, Neal, for offering to help do the presentation tonight. And Neal is a great asset to the refuge. We depend on him for so many things, and he's great to work with. Just always there to help, and a very positive force at the refuge. And I don't know if everybody's met some of the other staff and interns. So the biology interns that are on, would you mind just saying hello and introducing yourselves?
Yeah, I can start.
Yeah, thanks, Anna.
I'm Anna. I'm a biology intern this summer, but I was also a biology intern last summer. So it's really awesome to be back at the refuge and getting to see the spring stuff at the refuge, because I was only there for summer and fall last year. So I'm really grateful to be back again.
Would you tell a little bit about the project that you're working on?
Yeah, of course. So this year I'm looking at some orchids in the buzzard head remnant right off the tallgrass trail, right next to the visitor center. And I'm looking at the twayblade orchid and the showy orchid, because in 1999, there was a study done by an intern, and she found 293 of these orchids, and Karen has seen only one on the refuge. So I was like, so she thought that would be a good idea for me to go back there and look at this historical population and see what I could find. And so with help from the other biology crew members like Neal and Kara, I think we're up to 76 orchids I found so far. None of them have bloomed yet, so I'm not exactly sure which species I'm looking at, but I'm excited to go back and see what species I've actually found.
Sounds like an exciting project. Would you offer the insight on it's not very easy what you need to do to find the orchids?
Yeah, so these orchids are shade-loving species, and the buzzard head remnant is kind of overgrown with honeysuckle and multiflora rose. So basically you just get on your hand and knees and crawl underneath the canopy until you find some.
I was offering my services to help until I heard that. So I don't know if I would ever get up after that. I may have to pass. Thanks, Anna. I appreciate it. That's an awesome project, and we're so glad you're here. And then Kara, would you mind saying hello and giving us a little bit about your internship, which is coming close to an end?
Yeah, sure. I think most of you already know me from the last Friends meeting I went to, but I'm Kara, and I've been a spring intern here at Neal Smith. I'm actually ending my internship next week, but I plan on visiting a lot in the future. In my project, I made an interpretive talk to put on the app for the tallgrass trail, just sort of describing different species to the general populace, so they'll be more interested in learning about the prairie, which hopefully I'll finish soon once Nancy gets me my edits.
I keep getting notes in my email and in the hallways, where's my edits? So she's been very patient with me. So yeah, we have that on-cell app that that you can download, and it already has the wildlife drive audio tour. So this will be similar, but it'll be for the walking trail, for the tallgrass trail, and it'll show photos, text, and then eventually audio for the talking about the medical uses of the plant and the ID of the plants that are found, the more common ones along the tall grass and overlook trail. So another great project. And then probably everybody may not have met Aiden and Haley. So Aiden, if you would just say hello and just a little bit of background.
Yeah, sure thing. So for anyone unfamiliar, my name is Aiden Reyes, and I guess not just started anymore. It's flown by. But
You're a veteran.
Yeah, but I started in January under Nancy as a visitor services intern. So been here for about close to 4 months now. So it's been going well.
And then Haley is our relatively new seasonal park ranger that hit the ground running on the first day. I said, you want to go out and girdle trees? And she said, sure. So that was one of the first things she did. So she hit the ground running. So Haley, would you say hello?
Hi, I'm Haley Lindsay. I live in Newton here. Been working at the Refuge for about 3 weeks now. I'm originally from Maryland, but I've lived all over Utah, Oregon, West Virginia. So I'm new to the Iowa area, but I'm really definitely enjoying being at the Refuge and working as a seasonal park ranger there, working a lot with Nancy and Aiden and really everyone there too. So happy to have everyone. And then I think we also still have, I think we have Nick on here too, the other biology intern.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see Nick. Would you like to say hello?
Sure. Hi, my name is Nick. I'm just wrapping up my first week here at the Refuge. One of the biology interns, and I'll be here until October.
I think, Nick, we might have missed that last half because your audio broke up a bit.
Yeah, sorry, my internet's real spotty. I was just saying I'm super glad to be here at such an amazing place, working with so many great people. So.
And you're from Illinois, is that correct?
Yeah, the Chicago area.
So Nick jumped right in, and he participated in a bison necropsy the first couple of days he was here. So we don't wait around. We just kind of throw our interns and Refuge folks right into the mix of things. So they're pretty hardy and do a great job. So thanks, guys, for introducing yourselves. So if you would, just to get familiar, we'll be recording this session. So if you do not want to be recorded or heard, just go to the bottom left of your screen. You'll see a microphone icon and a video icon. And if you just click on that, you'll see a diagonal line through it. That means that your audio and your video is off and you will not be recorded. And if you'd like at any point in time, you can just unmute yourself and ask a question or you can put any information you'd like to share in the chat. So just as an icebreaker, even though it's kind of not any really spring, but there's been a spring summer happening at the Refuge, some really cool things happening. So what has been your favorite spring/summer sighting so far over the last couple in May, I guess? So I have a number of them. Some of them are the bison calves. We now have 10 bison calves. And then also just the spring migration of birds is just really great. Joan and I we took a walk in the Oak Savannah and we saw a bird that's uncommon for the Refuge called a yellow-throated warbler. So some really cool things happening. And then we had, I don't know, maybe 60 or so students, 4th grade or 5th grade students, and we're in the bison room and we're going to take them out behind the visitor center. And there, just at the door, was 4 baby killdeer chicks sitting on the concrete. So the parents were going crazy, but they were smart enough to get them out of there before the kids went outside. So lots of spring happening. So if you, the question in the in the chat is there any spiderwort yet? So Anna and Nick, and Kara, I'll leave that to you. The biology interns will know more about that than I would.
There's not any spiderwort blooming right now, but there is wood betony's blooming, marsh marigolds are blooming, and then field pussy toes are blooming. So there are some prairie blooms out there. Oh, and prairie violets. So those are the species that we've been seeing blooming.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I appreciate you sharing that. And I yet to see pussy toes. So if there's one nearby the visitor center, please show me where they are. Because I have never seen them.
There's one, so there's a white sign pointing for delivery trucks to go to the dock. And there's some pussy toes right there next to the sidewalk.
I'll have to take a look at it. So I've never seen them, and they're one of the first blooming plants in the prairie. So thank you for sharing that. And Aiden said, yeah, putting sunscreen on, and we're already starting using sunscreen, and provides him some really good memories of being out on the water, for sure. I'm sure it's starting to feel like Texas. And Kara said she saw a coyote during, they were setting up monarch plots today, and they saw a coyote out there. So lots of cool things happening. So feel free to share in the chat or unmute yourself if you're interested. Love to hear what you have to say. So we'll roll into some some updates of the refuge. We have some really positive things going on, which is really nice to be able to say. So lots of burning this spring, and that's been a long time coming, and that's really vital to the fire dependent ecosystems that we have on the refuge. And so it probably close to 1,000 acres have been burned so far this spring. Do you know the number, Neal, offhand?
I don't know the exact number, but yeah, it's right there around 1,000 that we got this spring.
And which is fantastic. So that's probably the most we've seen in a long time. And if you ever go and look at the the burned areas, right after the burned areas, it's pretty phenomenal. You'll see all kinds of birds coming in. And what's really interesting during this time of year, the Swainson's hawks, which are coming from, I think, Central and South America, they're flying over and they see the smoke and the flames and they come right in because I'm thinking that they're either eating the animals that are running away from the flames or eating nice crispy insects and things that are left over. I'm not quite sure, but soon as they started burning out there, I was watching and the Swainson's hawks came right in. So pretty interesting. And then only ant mounds are exposed. They're always out there, but they're really exposed so people get a chance to see them. So we get a lot of questions about that. So pretty neat to have that burning going on. So the oak savanna was burned, but it was kind of getting late in the season, so it didn't fully get through the oak savanna. So there was some burning done there, but like I said, it was getting too green and too wet for it to really carry the fire well. So hopefully they'll try again in the fall. The goal this year is to burn another 1,000 acres in the fall. So a total of 2,000 for 2022, hopefully. So yeah, somebody said belted kingfishers and eastern kingbirds are back. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And Joan said lots of birds, redstarts, vireos, warblers, bluebirds, gnatcatchers, orioles, grosbeaks. They're just so beautiful, the variety. And then Sandy and Fred said any red buds. So I don't know if we have red buds on the refuge. Is that a native tree? Does anybody know? I'm not sure, but boy, they are pretty. I've been to like Red State Park, and just amazing to see the red buds in bloom. And yeah, lots of spring beauties starting to come up, dandelions, violets, and buttercups. So yeah, and Rick said, yeah, they like the barbecue, the Swainson's hawks. Yeah, definitely a barbecue going on down there, Rick. And Anna included that spring beauties, trout lilies, Dutchman's breeches, woodland phlox. So finally, the spring ephemerals, those early flowering plants in the oak savanna are starting to come out. They bloom and they flower and set seed almost before the canopy of leaves comes out. So they utilize that sunlight to grow and have a quick life cycle. So if you have a chance, take a walk in one of the oak savannas or one of your local woodlands, and you'll get to see those early spring ephemeral wildflowers. They're really beautiful, really dainty typically, and low to the ground. So you have to look closely. Well, thanks for sharing, everybody. Appreciate that. Sandy and Fred said in southern Iowa, maybe for the red whore. And somebody said in Sheridan, am I saying that correct? Red whore plants. So thanks for sharing, everybody. So another good news besides the prescribed fire is that the visitor center is going to be opening full time. So we haven't been open full time since March of 2020 when COVID hit. So we're going to be altering our hours a little bit, but we'll be open from Tuesday through Saturdays from 9 to 4, which is a big improvement over the 3 days a week, half days. So that's really great news. And if you're interested, we could really use some additional help staffing the visitor center desk now that we're back to opening full time. So let me know, or Joan know, if you're interested in doing that. That's a really critical job because we're your ambassadors for the refuge and helping to generate money for the refuge through the nature store. So if you're interested, let us know. And you don't have to cash register. You can be a greeter, like on a busy days on Saturdays. We typically need 2 people. So we have somebody work the cash register. You can be a greeter and just give out information if you don't like using the cash register. So let me know if you're interested. And busy with America Beautiful Pass to 4th grade students, and that's through the America Beautiful program, federal lands program. We have a variety of passes such as the senior pass. So the 4th grade students that have been visiting, we've been giving them those free federal passes, which gets them into a number of different federal agencies for free. So they get to go out and they can go to the Grand Canyon or one of their local federal agencies and get out there and get to see their public lands for free, which is really cool. So that's been a lot of fun. We hosted World Migratory Bird Day, which is sponsored by the agency that's actually partnering to provide Aiden as an internship for us. So World Migratory Bird Day is an international program, and it's through the Environment for the Americas, and they focus on bird migration and bird conservation. So they sponsor World Migratory Bird Day, which is typically in our area in May. So we hosted a program last Saturday, and Aiden and Haley did a bang up job getting things in crafts ready. And we have a self-led activity out on Overlook Trail. We had peat pots with milkweed seeds available. And Joan was fantastic and came out and staffed the craft tables and the information tables throughout the time that we had the event. So that was really great. And we'll be doing a lot of outreach programs this summer, and we're making some really good connections with the urban areas, communities, which we really haven't worked with a lot. And we're trying to strive to get new people that haven't experienced the refuge. So some of the new groups we'll be working with are the Des Moines schools through their summer camps, boy and girl clubs in Des Moines. And then additionally, we've been working with the Polk County Conservation Youth Group, and they're coming out and doing projects. And we'll also be working with Blank Park Zoo's teen volunteer program. So we're getting some new groups coming out and working on the refuge, which is a lot of fun. And we finally got the Oak Savannah Kiosk and signs placed. So if you're at the refuge, go down to the Oak Savannah Kiosk, Oak Savannah Trail, and you'll see the kiosk. And that was built through a grant that the Friends provided, and that Jim has been really wonderful in keeping going and got us an extension so we can to complete the project, and has been very, very patient. So that's finally put up, and it was a lot of team effort. All the staff pitched in to do that. So very grateful, and I think it looks really great. And what's really wonderful about it is one of our volunteers was really the lead in the construction of that, Steve Haas, who was he's retired now, but that was his career, was in construction. So he offered to help build that kiosk. So Neal, Steve, our maintenance staff, and Steve built that kiosk, and it looks actually really great. So take a look at that. So Pauline Drobny, who was the very first biologist for the refuge, she has been stationed at the refuge for a number of years now, but she has been working at a regional level. So she hasn't been a refuge employee for a number of years after she transferred from being a refuge biologist to a regional position. So she's been with the refuge, or at the refuge, for 30 years, and did an amazing job and left behind a tremendous legacy of investigating and applying how to reconstruct and restore Oak Savannah and reconstruct prairie. So she was on the cutting edge of learning how to do this, and put time, dedication, and passion that created the refuge that we have today. So she retired. We had a going away breakfast for her, and but she'll be sticking around, and we're hoping to see that she comes back and volunteers with her. So Pauline Drobny will always, she left a legacy at the refuge and left a lot of wonderful things for people and wildlife to enjoy, and a healthy environment for us all. Very grateful for that. And then we have another long time employee that'll be retiring, and that is Paula Dykstra. And she was the actually second employee hired at the refuge. And Paula is our administrative officer, and she is just phenomenal. She just the glue that keeps the refuge together. She's there to help and does anything she can, and is just efficient and timely and very helpful. So we're very happy for Paula, but very sad for us that we're going to miss having her at the refuge, but she'll be retiring in July, and I'll give you more updates on that. Another note is that since we're starting to move towards opening more and having more programs, this platform that we've been using, these Zoom meetings, we're going to start to move towards doing quarterly instead of monthly. So the purpose of these meetings was to keep our volunteers engaged, and I really appreciate people that have been participating. But as we get busier and busier and we get more and more contact with our volunteers, we'll see you more face to face. We'll still give you updates, but it's going to be at a quarterly time frame after this meeting. And it's just to help people, help our staff to work more efficiently. And but we'll still keep getting that information out to you. And we're grateful that you've been participating. And let's see, Karen gave me some updates. So as I mentioned, there's 10 bison calves so far. Typically we get between 12 and 15 a year, and some of them have been born as late as November. So there's probably still more to come. Just this past week, a yearling was found in the enclosure, and it was, unfortunately, it couldn't get up. So they had to, and there was something critically wrong with it, and they had to put it down. So they did a necropsy. The bio division staff did a necropsy on it, and it looked like that the samples that they took and the way the animal's condition looked like it was healthy, but we're not quite sure what happens with that. So if an animal, when it dies, a bison or an elk dies and it's in relatively good condition, they will do a necropsy, which is very similar to an autopsy, and there's protocol and samples that are taken and then sent out for analysis. So as we met Nick, and Nick just started with us, and Kara will be winding up her internship next week. And thank you to the friends and the volunteers that support the store, and the friends members, because without that support, we would not have our interns, and they are vital to our ability to do what we do without them. So volunteers and interns really are the what makes the refuge tick and be successful, because we need all that talented staff to help us out. So we're very grateful for the friends for supporting the money, and the volunteers and the friends members for supporting those funding for our interns. So the first monarch and milkweed was sighted on the refuge just recently, and Tenley Turner, who is a biotech for the Fish and Wildlife Service, she is setting up monarch monitoring plots. So throughout the summer, the bio crew and sometimes the visitor services staff will be going out and monitoring those plots, looking at the vegetation, as well as for eggs and caterpillars and adult monarch butterflies. And another good piece of news, the refuge received a grant, a Fish and Wildlife Service grant, so they will be hiring the working dogs for conservation. And if you're not familiar with that, the dogs are actually trained to sniff out invasive species. And we have a big problem with Sericea lespedeza. So the working dogs are actually trained to sniff those plants out, and then the handler will actually GPS that location, and then our staff will go out and treat those invasive species. So a pretty phenomenal program. Finally, the habitat management plan for the refuge Karen worked very diligently and very hard on that project, so that is complete. The biology crew will be now switching to doing a lot of herbicide treatment on invasive species now that the weather is getting warm, and that is not an easy job, but I commend them for doing that. They're dressed in long sleeves and pants and out in that heat and going through the prairie, so it's not an easy job, but a very necessary job. So I thank the bio crew for taking that on. We're still continuing with girdling trees in the oak savanna. So that is just using a draw knife to take out the outer tissue layer of the trees, and that kills the trees that don't belong in the oak savanna. So if you're interested in learning how to do that, let me know. And then something really special is that Karen is going to get to go on a detail the first half of June up to Alaska. So she's going on a detail, which is meaning she stays with our refuge, but it's just a special project that she'll be working on. So she'll be flown up to Alaska and she'll be doing bird surveys. I think it's in the boreal habitat in Alaska. So she had to go to an 8-hour training on bear safety. So she's going to be in quite a different world when she gets up there. So I'm jealous, but I'm very, very excited and happy for Karen that she's being able to do that project. And then one thing I did forget to mention is that we would really like to get a crew of trail maintenance volunteers together. So we are going to host a training on June 2nd, and we're going to be training volunteers to help us take care of our trails. They need some help just trimming and weeding and fixing signs, all that kind of work. So if you're interested, we'll be putting out an email and posting on Facebook. If you can't make it on June 2nd for the training, that doesn't matter. You can just contact me and we'll get you trained up on that. And Aiden's going to be leading that effort. And one last thing is that we're in the midst of amazing migration. So we have all these birds that are migrating through, and this is the height of that migration. And Karen noted that just last night, 8 million birds passed through Jasper County last night. So it is just an amazing event. So if you haven't been out bird watching, I encourage you, you will see things that you don't typically see because these birds may be just resting and stopping and then moving on to a northern area to breed. Even in the evening or at night, if you go out and listen, you may even hear some of the birds as they're migrating. So I really encourage you to get out there. And I did have a website. I will try to put it in there it is. If you want, you can go to Birdcast and it gives you information on the migration. Karen shared that with me and I just put it in the chat. So lots of wonderful things going on at the refuge and just in nature in general. So I appreciate everybody for listening. If I missed any bit, would Jack mention information about what you've been working on? Aiden, I'll turn it over to you first.
Sorry, you said turning it over to me just
I
to
think Aiden
update.
might have froze.
You froze a bit. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Sorry, I don't know if I froze or you froze.
Oh,
Might have been
okay.
me.
It was you.
Okay. Did I look funny when I froze?
Yeah.
Mouth open.
Okay,
ahead,
so just
Aiden.
an update on what I've been doing, what we've been doing.
Yeah, what you've been doing. Yeah. And if I forgot anything.
Yeah. Let me think. Recently, the visitor services team worked towards staffing an event at the Greater Des Moines Botanical Garden in downtown Des Moines. So Haley and I went out there and staffed a table at their Earth Day event. I believe it was April 22nd or 23rd, whenever that was. And we did peat pots, our peat pot event or exhibit, as some of y'all may be familiar, planting milkweed for pollinators. And we talked to a total of 647 people in just what, Haley, 6 hours?
Yeah. And a fair number of those actually made the peat pots too. So
yeah. So spread a lot of milkweed around and had a very successful outreach event. And I'm sure.
And you had help.
yeah,
Yes,
I was going to
actually.
add that.
Yes,
We had a lot of
sir.
help from volunteers too.
Yeah, appreciate that, sir.
Definitely, as I'm sure you guys can attest to it, definitely times when even 4 sets of hands was almost too little.
Yeah, but other than that, as Nancy said, we've been having a lot of school groups back in, which is great to see, and at least for me, entirely new things since I started in January. These are kind of the first groups coming in, but it's been really, I think, successful so far. No complaints, knock on wood. So.
Well, that's good to hear. And Haley, would you like to share any updates or things you've been working on?
Been starting to work on a lot of organization of some parts of their storage cabinets. I'm really fond of organizing things, so trying to get some things organized. Also going to be working on trying to get some of our volunteers sign up things kind of in an organized Google format. So be a little easier on Nancy, hopefully, than her email chains. Still send out a mass email, but kind of ideally we'll have some type of calendar sign up form where you guys can all go on and see certain events and see how many people were requesting and how many places are still available, things like that. So doing a lot of organizing, and still, I guess this is my 4th week now, but it's been flying by.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, we've been so busy with school groups. We kind of every day it's been real fast paced, and we haven't had a lot of time even to get a lot of training done for Haley. But we're working on it, and but we're enjoying the school group, so it's been lots of fun. Thank you both for sharing. So I will turn it over to Joan, if you want to give us an update on the Friends.
Yeah, well, we're kind of still feel like on a holding pattern after COVID. We still have our monthly board meetings. We really haven't, scheduled anything too much for events or anything. Our main thing too is, like Nancy mentioned, with the nature store, since that is, main source of income, that we just need volunteers for that. So, but otherwise we'll kind of see what the summer brings. If we can get some other things help. We just try to focus on helping the refuge staff as much as we can, since they are getting very shorthanded there. So we'll try to do as much as we can for them. So, and thank you for all the volunteers, for all of you that are on the call and do so much. We appreciate it.
And any of the other Refuge Friends board members want to share? Jim, do you have any updates?
I really don't have any updates. I just am pleased to see some people on this Zoom meeting I've not seen before. I haven't seen Rick Hager in a long time, and by golly, he's here. How about that? And the interns, a lot of the interns I've not met yet. I come out to the refuge on Saturdays, alternative Saturdays, to sit at the desk and try to work with people there. Daryl is also on, I see, and he's frequently comes out too. So we have 2 people at the desk, and with the increase in the number of people we've had on Saturdays, I have a feeling when we open more and through this summer, there are going to be a lot of people out there. We really need help manning that desk and greeting the people. A happy person is a person who will contribute. And I like to see people contribute. Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Jim. Daryl, do you have any updates to share? I don't know if Daryl's, but we'll see if we can come back to Daryl if he has something. We'll move. Mark, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, hi, Mark Lyle here. The only thing I would share is I will be retiring from the board one of these months. I believe it's in the February meeting. Leah Stevens, who is the branch manager there at the bank in Prairie City, which is now going from, oh boy, what's the First Interstate Bank? I think it's the new name. She's in the transition for that, but she is picking up the responsibilities for all the treasury activity.
Well, Mark, we thank you for your dedicated service. You've been just so helpful in so many ways. He's the behind the scenes. He does the insurance. He does the work on the budget. He does work on the register. He's been phenomenal in supporting us through these Zoom meetings. So, Mark, we truly appreciate all the work and dedication you provided to the refuge, and we hope that you'll stick around and we'll still be seeing you as you retire from the board.
I'm not hiding yet.
Good. That's a good thing. Very good. So anybody else, you're more than welcome to unmute if anybody has anything to share. That includes the bio interns, or you can put it in the chat. So we went pretty long because we had so much good news to share. So I don't want to take any more time from Neal's presentation. So as we're going along, if you have questions, please put it in the chat, or you can unmute and ask a question as Neal goes along with his presentation. So we'll turn it over to Neal, and thank you so much again for offering to present today, Neal.
You bet, I'm happy to. So let me see if I can figure out how to share my screen here.
That's always the most difficult part of a presentation.
Yeah. You guys see that?
Yes.
Let me see if I can. There we go.
And by the way, all of these sessions are recorded, and I have a link if you're interested. There's a lot of great information, and you can view these recordings. I'll just share the link with you folks. Let me know if you'd like to have that.
Alrighty, well, I'll get started here. So again, my name is Neal. I'm excited to talk with you guys today about some prescribed burning, a little bit of the history, why we do it, and kind of the practices that we use on the refuge. I've been in the prescribed fire program for the Fish and Wildlife Service for about 3 years now. So I'm fairly new to it, but it's been an awesome experience, and it's such a neat tool that we can use as land managers to really utilize and make the prairie a better place. So I'm going to get started with why fire. Why are we putting fire out on the landscape and burning so many acres every year? And it really, quite simply put, is that prairie would not exist without fire. Most ecologists agree that for the last 5,000 years, prairie vegetation would have diminished if it weren't for fire. So where was this fire historically coming from? Most of it was believed to be from indigenous people, and they used it much as a tool like we do today. So they used it for things like hunting, not only to drive game, but to attract game to an area because of the new growth that would come following the fire. So it would attract large herds of bison and made hunting a lot more strategical for them. It also made traveling easier. So I'm sure, as many as you know, walking through the prairie can be quite tough when you're wading through 6-foot-tall blue stems. So they used it to burn large areas, and it just made traveling so much easier for them. And then lastly, safety. So of course you don't want all these fuels right next to where you're going to be setting up camp and laying your head at night. So they would a lot of times burn around their villages. That way, if there was a natural fire that came to the area, they would be protected. So that kind of goes into the other cause of the fires historically, and that was from natural causes. Typically in the summertime, during hot and dry weather, or there'd be dry lightning strikes. And those would be the kind of the main sources of ignition naturally. So throughout the Great Plains, historical fire intervals were thought to range anywhere from 1 to 35 years. And a lot of scientists believe that in the tallgrass prairie, those intervals were even smaller. So from likely 1 to 10 years. And because of this, we now end up with the prairie we have today, and a lot of plants and animals that have adapted and evolved and are really dependent upon the prairie, like the bur oaks that are fire resistant, and grassland birds like the Henslow sparrow that rely on the prairie to nest. So what is a prescribed burn? A prescribed fire is a controlled fire applied to the landscape under a specific set of environmental factors to achieve management goals. So what might these management goals be? They can range from varying things or multiple things. So one large one we deal with at the refuge is controlling undesirable vegetation, such as invasives or woodies. A lot of woody encroachment can be controlled by fire. And then restoring and maintaining ecological function. So the function of, like the oak savanna, wouldn't persist if we didn't run fire through it. And then there's a lot of science out there that states that frequent fire burning intervals can help also control plant disease, and then improve plant production. So after a fire, you'll have this new lush growth of green, and a lot of these flowers will bloom and pollinate at the same time and increase seed production as well. Of course, fire is good at promoting diversity of the plants, and then also provides an important food source for grazing animals. So in the bison enclosure, a lot of times we'll kind of do patch burns, rotate areas that we burn in the bison enclosure to provide them a new source of food. And on that same token, we try not to burn the whole bison enclosure at once, because of course that's going to diminish all their food. And then lastly, the same kind of way that Indians use it for safety, we use it to reduce fuels and the threats from wildfire. So just reducing that fuel load on the landscape. So how much and when do we burn? So tallgrass prairie, there's no really hard and fast rule, but there are some generally accepted practices. For newly created tallgrass prairie, it's generally every year initially, the first 2 or 3 years, until a lot of those plants get established. And then once you have a nice established prairie, those burning intervals are usually every 3 to 5 years. So at Neal Smith, we try to burn at least a third of the refuge every year. That doesn't always happen, but that allows us to kind of rotate when we're burning, so animals can repopulate those burned areas subsequent to us burning them. And then the oak savanna, we try to burn every 10 to 15 years. And that's kind of dependent on how much woody encroachment we're having. So if we're having more woody encroachment, we'll try to burn that a little more frequently. So there's also a range of different times when we burn. Typically, we'll burn in the dormant seasons, which are going to be spring and fall, kind of that March, April, and then October, November timeframes. But there's also growing season burns. So if conditions exist where we've had a hot and dry kind of summer, we can put a run fire across the landscape in the summer. And this can be really beneficial to help target certain species such as woodies, because it allows that fire to persist on the cambium layer, the living growth of those trees, a little longer, and can really help knock them back. So prescribed burn planning. What is a prescribed burn plan? So that's going to be conducted under a set of site-specific and environmental conditions prepared in advance. So what is all in this plan? We're going to include things like objectives, some of our habitat goals that we might have, the types of fuels that are going to be present, where we're going to be burning. For example, are we going to be burning tallgrass prairie? Are we going to be burning our oak savanna? And then we'll also have boundaries of units that we plan on burning. So to the right there is an example of a map that we make in our plans. And that kind of delineates where we want this controlled fire to be. And then there's also the precise weather conditions that have to exist for a certain unit. So say there's a highway that's to the east of a unit we're going to burn, and we get a strong west wind. Well, of course, that's not going to be ideal conditions, because we're going to be throwing smoke on the highway, and that's going to cause all kinds of safety issues. So there's this precise set of weather conditions that also has to exist. And then the individuals and entities that we have to notify, typically we'll notify Jasper County Dispatch, local fire stations, and then the local weather service to get to spot weather forecast. Another thing that we note is the location of the fire breaks. So if you've seen these large swaths of mowed areas in some of our units, those are going to be our fire breaks, and we use those to help control where we want that fire to be. And it kind of slows down on those fire breaks and allows us to stop it in its tracks. And then what kind of personnel and equipment we might need for that prescribed fire. So say we're burning just a few acres, we might need 5 or 6 people on the staff, or say we have, we're burning a couple hundred acres where we need, 15 people plus in a crew. And then also noted in there is going to be a lot of hazards. So do we have utility poles in the burn area that we need to worry about? Are there any wet areas, crossings, kind of stuff like that? So one major consideration when we're doing this is fire behavior. All firefighters in the Fish and Wildlife Service have to know exactly what is going on with the fire and what influences the fire. So fire behavior is the response of fire to physical and atmospheric conditions. And a lot of variables kind of go into play that control that behavior, such as fuel types. So like I mentioned earlier, whether we have light fuels like prairie grasses or heavy denser fuels like downed logs and timber. And then weather, of course, is a big variable. Winds play into account. Of course, higher winds are going to lead to more intense fire, a faster moving fire. Humidity, so that's one thing we pay really close attention to. Of course, the humidity in the air plays hand in hand with the moisture that's in the fuel. So if we have really low humidities, we're going to have some really intense burns. And then topography. We don't have as much topography, say, as out west, where they have mountains that really come into play, but we can use it to our advantage in some areas because we know that fire is going to run uphill and generally creep slower downhill. So these are all kind of dependent upon the fire triangle, which is shown here to the right, and all these are elements that are needed. Without one of these, we can't have fire. And with the addition of more, that's going to influence how that fire behavior acts. So fuels are going to be the main source of energy for a fire and have a lot of different varying characteristics. One of the biggest ones is size. So those larger, denser fuels, again, are going to ignite more slower, but they're going to burn longer. So they may burn all night, whereas the prairie is just going to be a very flashy burn and be less intense. The moisture content, so living plant material that's green, of course, is going to have a lot more moisture than dead and dormant plants, and drier fuels are going to burn faster and more readily, of course. Chemical composition comes into play. So plants with waxes, oils, and resins like pines and cedars are going to burn a lot more intensely than plants with low amounts like hardwoods and tall grass. And then lastly, the amount of fuels. So fuels that are densely spread across the landscape are going to burn very fast and more evenly than, say, patchy fuels like that we'd have in the bison enclosure from grazing across the landscape. So those will burn a lot slower. And then, of course, we'll get a little bit more into weather. So when weather influences all three elements that are in the fire triangle. So it's something that we really pay close attention to when doing our prescribed burn plans and even when we're doing the prescribed burn. So temperature, of course, how that relates, a high temperature is going to decrease the amount of moisture in the fuels. So that's going to influence the fire and make it more intense, of course. Relative humidity, like I mentioned earlier, is going to affect the moisture in the plants. Wind is going to be our most difficult element to predict. Velocity and direction are kind of the most critical elements affecting fire behavior because it determines the direction of the fire and the smoke. Of course, we don't want to be throwing smoke across the road or towards a neighbor. It's going to increase that oxygen supply, one of the elements of the fire triangle. It's going to increase moisture loss in fuels, increase the speed of the fire, and it also can preheat vegetation in front of the fire, which allows it to dry even faster. And then precipitation, that one's pretty obvious. Of course, if it's raining, we're probably not going to be burning, and that's going to affect fuel moisture. And then if we have a lot of large rain events in the spring, that's going to lead to greening of the vegetation and kind of slow down our activity. And then atmospheric stability is the last one. So a stable atmosphere usually resists the upward movement of air, which causes unpredictable fire behavior. And we typically measure that using the Haynes index, which indicates the dryness and stability of the air. And that's on a scale of 2 to 6. So a Haynes index of 2 is going to be a pretty stable atmosphere, whereas a Haynes index of 6 is going to be very unstable and lend a hand to intense fire behavior. So to kind of sum that up, some elements that are going to go into a low intensity fire, little slope. If there's little slope on the ground, you're going to have a low intense fire. North facing slopes, your fuels are small, fuels are living. So if you have green fuels, they're light and patchy, moisture is high, and light winds are all going to lend a hand to low intensity burns. High intensity, those are going to typically consist of areas with lots of slope, south facing slopes that will dry faster, where we have large fuels that are dead and dormant are going to be very intense. If the fuel loads are heavy and continuous across the landscape, moisture is low, and heavy winds. So here's kind of a depiction of how those are all influenced. To the left there, we see a south-facing slope that's going to have light fuels and is going to be dried by the sun. So of course, we expect that to have very intense fire behavior when compared to the north side of the slope, which is going to have very heavy fuels. And then to the right there, we can kind of see the influence of the slope and the airflow going up the hill and how it can preheat vegetation. So pre-burn preparations, these are kind of the things we do before we even get out there the day of putting fire on the ground. Things we need to consider are constructing those fire breaks and getting fire breaks around protection items like infrastructure. If we burn around the visitor center, we need to make sure that area is protected, or any other structures that might be out there that we want to keep. So fire breaks can be like our moat areas that you see a lot on the refuge, but they can also be natural areas like rivers and lakes, ponds, and a lot of times we use roads. A lot of our units are bisected by roads on the refuge, so they work as great fire breaks. Some of the things we consider when prepping equipment, we need to get our fire engine ready. So we have a large fire engine with a tank and a large pump on the back. We have ATV units that have pumps, and they're a little more mobile that allow us to get out into the units and attack fire. Water tenders, hand tools. We have a variety of hand tools we use from rakes and shovels to help us to kind of control the fire on the fire line. And then drip torches. If you're not familiar with a drip torch, it's basically a canister with a large wick on the end that holds a mixture of gasoline and diesel. And we use those as kind of a way to ignite the fire. And then of course, we need to make sure our radios are charged up, ready to go, because clear, concise communication is key to having effective operations on fire. Kestrels, which are kind of weather predicting instruments. And then Nomex clothing. So if you've seen the yellow shirts and the green pants that we wear, those are fire resistant clothing that we're required to wear and offers protection against burns. So the day of burning operations, we typically like to all get together and we'll get a brief. We'll get the crew, and the burn boss is gonna allocate, you know, whose duties are gonna be what. We have road crew positions, we have smoke spotters, people that are controlling traffic, people that are gonna be controlling the fire lines, igniters. So we'll kind of figure out who's going to do what task and lay that all out. We're going to go over the conditions, weather conditions that we have that day, and kind of the fire behavior we expect. We're going to go over the objectives, kind of what our habitat goals are with this burn, and then the smoke management. Again, we don't want to be throwing smoke across the road, or if we have a neighbor that's close by and the wind switch, we don't want to be putting neighbors or smoke on top of neighbors. And then last thing we'll do is kind of go over a contingency plan. So that's kind of like the oh crap, if a fire jumps a line and gets into another unit, are we going to attack that fire direct and put water on it, or do we need to get out ahead of that fire and burn out another area to kind of stop it and prevent it from traveling further? So once that's good, we're pretty much ready to put fire on the ground. And typically how that works is we'll get on the downwind side of the unit and slowly light a backing fire into the unit to create a large buffer of black on the downwind side. That way we can prevent fire from traveling and crossing fire breaks. And then once we have a good amount of black, we'll go upwind and carry the fire down from there. So after the firing operations are done, we'll typically do what we call a mop up, and we'll go out and patrol the lines, check to make sure there's no smoke on the fire breaks. If there's any large timber or burning embers, we need to make sure those are put out and put to bed before we go home at night. And then lastly, we'll go over an AAR, which is an after action review, and kind of just discuss with everyone what was the plan, what did we accomplish, and did it all go as planned, and kind of what we can do better and what we can work on. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions if y'all have any.
Hey, Neal, excellent presentation. That was just awesome. Thank you so much. So we did have a question in the chat, and the question was, how about the animals and insects that are living in where you're going to be doing that prescribed fire? You know, do many of them perish, get injured, or do they take refuge, or what's your thoughts on, you know, how do the wildlife manage with this application of fire?
Sure, that's a great question. So a lot of times with like mammals and things, those can outrun the fire. Of course, birds can fly away, but a lot of our animals there are going to be displaced. Really the biggest concern, I think, is going to be our insects. That's the things that are going to be hit the hardest. But that's kind of why we try to do patchy burns and burn a third of the refuge at a time. That allows those unburned areas to hold those populations, and when those burned areas, you know, green up and start a new prairie, then we can repopulate those areas.
And then, a lot of the animals have burrows underground that they can, because the
So
fire goes pretty
reptiles
quickly.
and things like that, they're going to find those wet, kind of damp areas and get out of the way of the fire. Things like grassland birds, you know, it's inevitable. We're going to probably burn over a few nests in the spring. They're typically pretty resilient. Grassland birds they'll have multiple broods a year, so that they're no problem that they can make a new nest, and they're typically pretty resilient with that.
And the benefit outweighs the things that the negative impacts, because if we don't burn the prairie, then we don't have prairie, and we don't have that wildlife in the
Yep.
ecosystem. So and then there's another question from Jim Johnson, and the question is, what training do observers or volunteers that help with the traffic control need to do to help with the prescribed fire?
So if anyone's interested, yeah, just reach out to me or Scott, the refuge manager, and it's pretty informal training. We'll just kind of go over with what we expect, and kind of the safety protocol, and how to communicate on the radio properly. And really, it's something anyone can do. So if anyone is interested, we're always looking for people to do kind of road guards and traffic control while we're conducting burns.
And Neal, if you would touch base, it's a pretty arduous physical taking on to become a wildland firefighter for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Would you describe the training and the physical and what's needed? And that's why we don't really allow volunteers, because there's so much cost and time that's put into training and getting somebody up to speed with that.
Right. There's a full gamut of different training modules that we have to go through, and courses and certifications that we have to have. And then there's actually a pretty intense physical that we have to go through. We have to get medical clearance, and we do what we call a pack test. So we'll put on a weighted vest and have to basically walk/run for 3 miles under 45 minutes. It doesn't sound like much, but after the end of the second mile, you're pretty dog tired of calves are burning. So yeah, there's a lot of different tests you have to go through, and safety training, and there's really a lot of loops you have to jump through before you can get out on your first fire.
Yeah, thanks for stating that, Neal. Yeah, and the good part of that is that it's for the person's safety, so that they're well suited for doing that arduous work, which is very difficult work. I was just out taking photos, and just the smoke and the soot, and you know, and I'm not even I'm just away from the fire, but just getting that residual smoke, and it was long lasting on me for the rest of the day. So it's not easy work, and it takes a lot of dedicated fire crew to really do a hard job. But I think most of them really are passionate and realize how important that job is. So we appreciate Neal's work. It's not easy work, and it's very beneficial. So thank you, Neal. Anybody else have any questions? Some really good questions. You can put it in the chat or unmute yourself. And if you have questions regarding any of the updates, you're welcome to ask about that as well. We did reach 7:30, so if you need to hop off, feel free to. Don't feel like you have to hang around. But we are very grateful that everybody joined us today, and very grateful that Neal did such an excellent presentation. Really well done, Neal. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for letting me talk with y'all today.
Yeah, you bet. So Joan said, interesting program. So glad you were able to do some burning this spring. And Sandy and Fred said also very interesting presentation. So on that note, I'll be hanging around a little bit. So if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to hang out, and I'll stay as long as the last person's on the video call. And I'll be sending out an email with the video link so that you can see some of these recordings, and there's some really good ones. I hope you can join and take a look at them. And then I'll also be sending out information about when we'll be hosting the next meeting, as well as some other volunteer opportunities. And Jane said, thanks, Neal. So thanks everybody for being awesome volunteers and supporters of the Refuge. We couldn't do what we do without all of you. We're very grateful. So, and thanks for the interns and the other staff and the Friends board members for being here tonight as well. And thank you, Mark, for doing a great job being our Zoom host. Much appreciated. Everybody enjoy the spring/summer, whatever you want to call it. Let's hope that it goes back to spring weather. It would be nice to have a little snippet of spring anyway.
Yeah.
But get out and see those birds, because the next couple of days through Iowa is going to be phenomenal. And those ephemeral wildflowers are also spectacular too. So hope everybody gets out. Take care, Fred. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah. Thanks.